know it from the inside because I know what it's like to have the police come to your house, and I know what it's like
Mm.
to go through the ringer, and there's nothing more heartbreaking. When I was talking to Robert De Niro about it, it was personal for him as well, and he was crying when we were talking about it, reading the script at the very beginning when I first was asking him to do it. And so I know that part, but then I also know the part of it that it's just regular and human and funny,
Mm-hmm.
And I guess what I've sort of fallen in love with in this second part of my of filmmaking is that since The Fighter really is because then what ended up happening is that it didn't get made. Everything happens in somebody else's time. I didn't. It was supposed to be made 5 years ago and it didn't get made, and then I made The Fighter. And so when I made The Fighter, I got even more specific, and I did do a lot of writing on the Fighter. I wasn't credited with it, but Scott Silver is a wonderful writer, and I the sisters and the Amy Adams role really were not prominent in it at all, and sort of the warmth of Christian Bale was something that was very important to me because the real person is very warm. But anyway, I focused in on the specifics of the way people are, and that's as interesting to me as the story.
Yeah.
The way they eat, the way they talk, the way they dress. That's entertaining to me, and so that's what Raging Bull or Goodfellas is one of the fun. They're the funniest movies I've ever seen. They're also two of the most riveting films I've ever seen. I could listen to those characters talk all day.
Right.
And so to me, the goal is to create characters I would want to talk all day, and they're usually extremely specific.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yes.
like De Niro's characters, very specifically. I made him a bookmaker, which wasn't true in the book. But I thought he was just more like an angry, obsessed fan in the book, and I thought he should be more modulated as a father. And I also thought
Gives him an action too.
well, we set it in the year 2008, which gave us a very specific season to follow,
Mm-hmm.
which ended with the Cowboys game. And Eagles culture is very specific, and I love it when you get on the ground and you meet people and you pick up more details and you keep rewriting. I must have rewritten it 20 plus times. You keep rewriting it with more details, and we would find out about the remotes. People would tell us there's a guy who shifts his remotes. I would say, you're kidding me, and he would tell me. And the bookmaking, that's also the year the economy collapsed, and the people like Robert De Niro's character lost their jobs. And I imagined that he was a regional manager for DHL Express, and he had lost his job, but not only his job, but his pension, which happened to many people that year. And so bookmaking becomes even more important.
Right. Right. And it adds to the sense of just a general sense of gamble. You don't need to know all those details, but you can feel them. And
but to go back, sorry, go ahead.
Sure. No, go for it.
Do people call you FX?
Yes, they do. Yeah. Short for Francis Xavier, but
I want to call you Francis Xavier.
Feel free.
It's a good name. It's going to take more time.
Yeah.
Well, Francis Xavier, I did not address your thing though about Bradley's back, which I want to come back to at the start.
Sure,
of the picture.
sure.
But you were going to say something about the specifics of the world.
Well, it struck me, when we're talking about storytelling, it struck me as a great way to begin a story because you managed to intrigue us. There's a sense of mystery about them, and we move through a couple of layers where we think we know what we're seeing and we don't, and you have a really nice way, and this is good in all of your films, of keeping us guessing. And I imagine you keep yourself guessing too. And I just wondered if you could talk about how you develop a story. You found your first footing with this character and got off to a sort of roaring start. If you could just talk about beginning telling the story.
Well, the first thing I knew was that I didn't want it. In the book, he was away for 4 years, and I didn't know how to do that character because I don't know that person. So I made it that he was a plea bargain for 8 months and not 4 years, and that very specific to the situations I know and the people I know. And I like starting on his back. I'm always, as a writer and as a filmmaker, I want to grab you and keep your attention. I want to grab you and emotionally grab you and narratively grab you, or just even with the world grab you. So I want to grab you by the throat and I don't want to let go. And that's just the kind of filmmaking that appeals to me. I understand there's all different kinds of storytelling and filmmaking that appeal to all different people for all different reasons, but that's what appeals to me. So I liked approaching Bradley Cooper from his back. I liked starting on Mark Wahlberg's back in The Fighter. I like, but where The Fighter really started though was on Christian Bale sitting on a couch. And what I liked was people's sense of, wait, that was Christian Bale, 5 minutes into the movie. And so I think there was a little bit of that with, wait, that's Bradley Cooper. He doesn't look like Bradley Cooper. By the time the camera comes to his face, and you look in his eyes, I knew I was reintroducing him. So, and also when you're in a situation such as that, you have a lot of time to talk to yourself and to reevaluate yourself.
Yeah.
And so he's talking to his ex-wife, who's a ghost, a phantom, but she's a major MacGuffin at the center of the whole story. She's his whole reason for living and continuing, how he can take the loss of his house, the loss of his job, the loss of his car, and be okay as long as he's focused on this one thing. You know, these people need structure and they need a secret plan that's theirs, and because they're under so many eyes are looking at them.
Yes.
So that's why the secrecy with the letter with Tiffany is so it's so imperative for their dignity that they do things on their own that they don't tell anybody about. You know, in which the dance collusion and all that stuff. So starting on his back and reintroducing him was something I thought was interesting. You got to hear him talking about the things that matter to him, and then you get to see his face, and it's a different face. He has scars on his face that we accentuated. We didn't cover them up.
And then you go straight from there into a great dialogue with his mother on the ride home, and you've introduced Dan, the other character, coming into the car. I think that you get off into a wonderful footing. And to jump to the fighter for a moment, there's a great moment at the middle of the fighter where the Christian Bale character is in prison, and he's basically undergoing his conversion experience. And what I really admired about what you did there was, as with showing a character from behind, you show him from a distance and in silhouette. He just sort of sinks to his knees, and it's like you gave the character his own privacy in a very interesting way that was actually I felt it brought us in more powerfully than not. But if you could talk about that kind of decision making, about how much to show about such a deep process in somebody.
I would say that was a very big decision in the third act, because we debated the third act for a long time, and with Robert De Niro and everybody, and I rewrote it many, many times. And in the book, you know, in the original screenplays, he had another episode in the third act when it was discovered that people had been lying to him, which was so humiliating to him, in order to help him. Right.
This is I'm sorry, this is in Silver Lining Playbook.
Oh yeah, sorry. Oh,
no, it's okay. And I jumped to the fighter, which was unfair,
okay.
But that's
we can do the fighter.
Yeah, but I was thinking about somebody's privacy. So
no, but I'm going to tell you, privacy, that's the same issue.
Right.
So the decision was that in this particular case, you know, we watch him and we don't really know what he's doing. He doesn't tell anybody what he's doing.
Right.
He doesn't tell anybody in his world, and he doesn't tell us. He's not telling his family about the dance thing so much. Eventually he does. He certainly hasn't told them about the letter. He figures out that Tiffany wrote the letter.
Yes.
And he doesn't tell anybody. He doesn't say a word to anybody. At first he just seems devastated by it in that wide shot outside of his house when he goes down in front of his house, and he just looks back at the house like, oh my God, what kind of a fool am I that people have lied to me and trying to help me? They're creating a whole thing because I'm so out of it that I can't even deal with the fact that my wife will not communicate with me. So instead of going deeper into his bad patterns and debating them about that, he just sort of took it upon himself as a man at that time to deal with it himself. And you see him running in the rain, you know, to the it's right before the Frank Sinatra. It's to Danny Elfman's music, and then shows up in her dance studio, and he just sits there and he just stares at her while she's putting tape on his shoes, and then you see her when she's tying his bow tie, which is very important. It's very important. Those are all silent moments of him.
Yeah.
And which, you know, are sort of when he's sort of doing this thing and we don't know what he's up to. And
Well, it's very powerful, and for being silent. And you know, one of the traps that we can all fall into as writers is being too verbal. And you seem to be in command of knowing what those silent beats are. Did you have more dialogue or stuff that you cut when you got to the set as a director to let it be a silent moment, or did you know even when you were putting it together on paper that this we don't have to talk about? Or
that was the decision. It was a scary decision, you know, because you hope. I mean, in retrospect, you always wish you'd covered things more ways to cover your ass. You know, let him talk. What happens if he talks? You know, let him talk about it. But in this case, you know, that was what we committed to. That corner was turned, and I was very grateful that we shot all that stuff of him just sort of being inside of himself.
Yeah.
And thinking about it. And I also write for the rhythm. It's very rhythmic and musical to me, the way the language goes and the way the scenes go. Yeah. And that was the great discovery for me with The Fighter, was that I knew those people. They were like family people I know from the Bronx or from Brooklyn, relatives that I thought were a freak show that turned out to be a great resource for me. Wonderful people. You know, I just was at a, you know, I was at a family reunion out in Long Island, which I'm not from Long Island, but many family members are from my dad's family are there, and they work at JFK, they work in cargo, they work in all these different, they're workers, and they're extremely specific people, and I just love watching them and listening to them, and that's what I can put into the picture and writing for them. And I wrote for Robert De Niro once he was committed to it, and I wrote in the rhythm that is a rhythm that I recognize from knowing him and from seeing his work. The Pat rhythm is probably a rhythm that's close to my own, not far off from my own, and my son's rhythm and Tiffany is a very particular character as well. I mean, she's not far from who Jennifer Lawrence is in some respects. I mean, she's unbelievably frank, guileless. I like characters like them because what I love about people like my son, and my son is in the movie. He's the guy who rings the doorbell, who comes to the.
He's doing a term paper on mental illness with the tape recorder. Yeah.
And we had a whole coda with him at the end that we just couldn't fit in, where it was paid off that he really was struggling himself with some issues, and that was why he was so curious, you know. But by the end of the movie, we were like, do we care?
Right.
About a tertiary character.
Right.
Save it for the DVD.
Yeah.
So those are the tough decisions.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious about what was in the novel as opposed to, you know, because the dance contest is so important to the film. And was that something that was there in the novel, or did you just find that in developing the character of Tiffany?
No, that was in the book. Matthew Quick, you know, had the dance. He had all those elements. He had the letter. He had the dance contest. He had the family. He had her family. I made it a more specific neighborhood where she knew I made the nemesis, Randy, the better, Paulie Herman, the nemesis who's the friend who's your best friend, but he's always taking your money. You know, he's always betting against you and taking your money.
Right.
And kissing your wife, you know. Those were Paulie's principal activities. But so I made her very specific in terms of she knew him from the neighborhood, and that was a nice thing to do. But the book had the dance. Gosh, that's part of what made it magical to me. I mean, I think that I know from my son that the only way out of these things is by doing things. You're not going to think your way out of it. You're not going to therapize your way out of it. I mean, it's like it's very behavioral. I mean, you can talk about your feelings all day long, and it is important you do that a little bit with people who have some of these matters, but you'll go down a rabbit hole with that, and you won't, you know. So you have to get out and do stuff, and that's why it was so important that he was out and running. That was his lifeline, you know. And that garbage bag, which was in the book, is simultaneously like an armor and also a flag. You know, he, like Tiffany, is declaring himself to the community. You know, yes, here I am. I'm the guy with the embarrassing incident. Here I am. I'm running down the street. You know,
right.
And she declares herself similarly. We originally had her. She was very goth when we first camera tested her, but she has a goth sensibility inside of her in her neighborhood, and we retained some of that and some of her, like her nail polish or the cross she wore, or the corseted coat she wore.
She's got such a great face, Jennifer Lawrence. I mean, another very transparent face that it didn't need to be goth. I mean, just speaking those words, she really communicated a lot.
Well, they're my favorite kinds of people in the sense that they have an effect on everyone around them, like a nuclear effect that's radioactive, because they can't be anything less than real and direct. They don't know how to, weirdly, even though what they're doing is they're involved in this strange manipulation with each other. When they're socially interacting with each other or other people, it can be nothing but frank and nothing but real, and it makes everybody be real. And that's what I liked what happened with Ronnie, John Ortiz's character, his best friend, who has the wife and the kid and the house and the cars and has everything in the job and commercial real estate. And, that was a new development in probably draft 12 to say, what if Ronnie was not just the happy friend, but was the friend who was struggling? And what if Pat allowed him to admit that? It was because of Pat that he could say, don't tell anybody. I'm not okay. Which became one of my favorite scenes in the picture.
Yeah.
When he says that. That's the effect these characters have. Jennifer's character and Bradley's character. That's why I love listening to them. They're, stand up in the middle of dinner and say, I'm tired.
Right.
We haven't eaten dinner yet, but I said I was tired. And they sit there and talk about their meds right in front of everybody. They don't care. I love that. You know what I mean? They're straight up.
The Indian therapist is a really
That was
wonderful.
part of the book as well.
Is that yeah?
Yeah.
He's tremendous, and you cast him very well. So he's got a tremendous presence, and yet, as like you say, this is not something one can therapize out of. All he can do is keep posing the right questions, and then the guy has to act upon it.
Well, they have to talk about everything that's happening, which they do. You know, from what clothes he's going to wear to the dinner.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that the therapist was so human, that he himself was an Eagles fanatic.
Right.
Which was a nice thing that was in the book, you know, that I did as much as I could with. I mean, and they talk about practically, you know, can he get a letter to Nikki? No, I can't do that. You have a restraining order. I love the flow of those scenes. There wasn't a lot of thinking in that. It just flowed very naturally. And we shot them. We were supposed to shoot them over a couple of days, but we ended up doing them in half a day because we were behind in the schedule. And fortunately, I think because they were written, they were able to do that. You know, the Indian actor Anupam Kher, who's made 450 movies in India. They make a lot of movies in India. He Skyped his audition from a village that had to get internet so he could Skype the audition, because he was in a village that was shooting a movie in some remote region. Anyway, he's a wonderful guy, and he was like, we're going to do all my scenes. I came all the way here from India. We're going to do all my scenes in like right now in 6 hours. And I was like, yes, and we did it, and it was just jammed right through it. It was great.
Mm. Well, you know, there's a great adage that Stanley Kubrick favored, and I think it's something that you seem to live by. He said there's no such thing as a bad idea. There's only better ideas. And it would seem that I would actually, looking at all of your work, you could amplify that to, there's no such thing as a bad person. There's only better people. You know what I mean? And sometimes the characters become better. You know what I mean? I don't find any villains in your work. There'll be characters that are so detached and clueless that they're really destructive. I mean, even the role you gave your son, where he's knocking at the door. I mean, he's a provocation to an explosion, but he's not. You know, you didn't plan him to be an evil character. He's actually got an agenda that we can understand. And I wonder if you could just talk about, you know, that approach to characterization, just at the writing stage, or when you're on the set and you've got to actually retool what you've written to become an effective story.
Well, you know, you really just have to inhabit that person and see everything from their point of view. Mm-hmm. And that was a great thing to do with Dick Eklund, the character Christian Bale played in The Fighter, because from Dick Eklund's point, you see everything from Dick Eklund's point of view. There's always an explanation. There's always he's trying his best. You know, people around him want to kill him. You know, but you see his sweet side. And Christian, as an actor, is wonderful at that. He's always saying, "Yeah, but I would think this." You know, and I'm about to work with him again. I'm very excited about it. You have to see it all from their point of view, and I don't enjoy making people black and white. I did know that scene where Robert De Niro chases my son outside in his pajamas. I had a vision that De Niro with a bloody nose was in his pajamas going across his lawn, and some people here may have heard me say this, but I do find, and it was something Bradley said, that the reckoning moments of yourself, your soul, your family, your relationship, they always seem to happen at 3:00 in the morning in your pajamas. And, you know, if you're a neighbor, you see that and you go, it's going down over there. Something. Mr. Solitano's outside in his pajamas and he's chasing a kid, you know, and he has a bloody nose. What is happening? You know, and that's when all the screws come off. I would say, so arguing it from every single character's point of view. So Bob De Niro has a currency, a life or death currency. There's 3 currencies in the picture. All right? Meaning, watching the Eagles games and the bookmaking that's his language, that's his monetary currency, life and death. All right? And it's the only way you can really connect with him or deal with him. And that's not far off from my father or other people I know. If you wanted to really talk to my dad, you had to sit with him and watch a lot of television and, you know, and watch a lot of sports probably. And eventually you could connect. You know, the only currency Bradley has, his main currency, life and death, is reconnecting to his wife and getting a letter to her. That's everything. Mm-hmm. That's his language that he speaks. And Tiffany's language is, you know, her dance, you know, that she dances. Not. But the beautiful thing about dance, like running, is it is what it is. It's just a thing, you know, it's this thing. And they have to pick music that reflects who they are, you know, and Pat, you know, was very Led Zeppelin or Stevie Wonder. Tiffany was very White Stripes, or Dave Brubeck, who just passed away a couple of days ago, doing Maria. All the music taken specifically, which was a great writing discovery for me, from Ronnie's iPod. Because Pat doesn't have an iPod because they took all his devices away, because they don't trust him with any devices, because he's going to call Nikki, he's going to break the restraining order. So they give him an iPod, and that's where he gets all the music from. And also that's really all Ronnie's music. But those three currencies then collide in that scene, the parlay scene.
Right.
Where she's dancing and she wants him to come out and dance with her. And that's a collision that as a writer, you're rubbing your hands together because you've gotten to the payoff. You've gotten to these three trains that are going down three different tracks very fast, and they're about to collide. And it's wonderful when, Jennifer Lawrence comes in and takes over the movie from Robert De Niro and Bradley. But I would say two of the most difficult things in both movies, Francis, is that I'm just going to go with Francis.
Go for it, man.
It kind of sounds nice.
Yeah.
I would recommend you consider it for this next chapter of your life. It was the setup. It took an enormous amount of thought as a writer and a filmmaker in both films for the first 20 minutes, the first 30 minutes. And in The Fighter, I was especially proud of how it came out. By the way, the kind of filmmaking I try to do makes it look easier than it is. That's what it's all about. I want things to feel captured, effortless, not like here's a frame and here's a performance and here's something important. More like you're just all of a sudden you're just in it. You're just dropped in with these people, and it means you're immersed. So you're immersed. You're in the middle of them talking about some shit, and you're trying to catch up. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So they're in the middle of talking about some heavy shit, and they're very serious about it. And I think that's good for an audience. You're like, well, good. I'm leaning forward in my chair. I want to find out. I want to catch up. I'm interested. And it's upon me to make that compelling. So you don't say like, well, I don't care. So in The Fighter, what we had to do in the first 20 minutes that we did, and I felt we've succeeded in doing it very deftly, was you have to introduce the fact that Dick Eklund is a has-been junkie, messed up dude with a sweetheart. Okay, you have to introduce the fact that he was a great champion and a hero in his community. You have to introduce the fact that his brother Mickey Ward is a younger brother by 9 years, who it looks up to him and is now trying to have his own time, and he's a very different fighter. And he doesn't have the finesse of his brother, and he doesn't have the respect entirely of his brother, and they have a weird passive-aggressive relationship where he relies on his brother, but he also feels let down by his brother. You had to introduce the fact that there was a mother who was like sort of a very big character running this whole family, who was an architect of this boxing careers and presided over 7 sisters who were like a gang, and there are these 7 sisters who are all very real. And it was like this family business. And you had to understand there was a police officer who worked in the corner of Mickey who was antagonistic to the mother and the brother, the drug addict. And that this guy had once knocked down Sugar Ray Leonard, okay? And they were heroes. So, when you look at how we did that, it's kind of like...
Yeah.
And it came together. It's like you start off on Christian Bale on the couch. You go to, he's talking to you. Who's this guy? And he sits with his brother. The brother never says a word. That tells you everything about their relationship, right? The brother's just a sweet guy, and here's this goofy, complicated guy who describes the 2 ways they fight. You do Super 8 footage. You go back to how they met, how they trained. It's a family thing. Then you hear the silent raking on the street. Oh, they're road pavers. So they're paving a road. You come in on the street, they're paving a road. Oh, they work together on a road crew. The fists come into the frame. The brother's fighting him. He's a fighter. Oh, the brother has an HBO crew there, which was a device that I wanted to introduce. There's an HBO crew. He thinks he's making a comeback, which gives me a narrative device so he can address the cameras like he did at the very start of the picture. At the very start of the picture, he can do that. There's a man who knows The Fighter well. He worked in our editing room. So you get that they're road pavers and that he's making a comeback and he's talking to the HBO cameras. Then the camera takes you through town. They go through town. You see there are sweaty road pavers who are treated like celebrities in this working class town of people at check cashing places and lotto ticket places that they are greeted like local heroes and celebrities. And they have a lot of warmth and energy and elan, And then you go to the gym and you just see the brother's hands, and he's waiting. Now you understand the brother is late, and he's always stands him up. And then the mother comes in, and she starts bragging on how he knocked down Sugar Ray Leonard. Now you go to the HBO footage, and now you see the guy in the house fantasizing about his HBO footage while he's knocking down a fellow crackhead, okay, in the house. Intercutting between him boxing a crackhead, smoking crack, and cutting to when he knocked down Sugar Ray Leonard. All right, so that we were very proud of that. That took an awful lot of. That was very dense, but it was just meant to be entertaining and keep moving and hook you in a way. That took a lot of work to do that. And in this case, it's a similar set of cards. You have to understand this guy. He's in a mental hospital. His mother's pulling him out. What's his problem? I don't really know. He's being driven home. He's got a friend who jumped in the car that seems like a great guy, but apparently was not supposed to leave the hospital. So he's got a very good friend who's trying to do a solid for, and you're in that area of where like, well, how crazy are they? And it seems like it could go. You're defining who they are. They seem nice to me. What's the big problem? Oh, he grabbed the steering wheel when his mother didn't want him to turn around. He tried to say, no, don't turn around. That was a little crazy. Grab the steering wheel and tell your mother you're not. And the mother says, I just can't take it. I went to bat with the courts for you. And then you go from that to he walks in. Now you cut to Robert De Niro talking. Well, he tells us in the car he wants to read his wife's syllabus. We still have no idea what he's talking about.
Right.
I want to read my wife's syllabus, high school syllabus. Okay.
Yeah.
The mother looks at him like, that's crazy. We see her in Philadelphia. We see the stadium. All of a sudden, we come into a house with Robert De Niro talking to Paulie Herman about who's America's team, the Cowboys or the Eagles. What's more American symbol, a cowboy or Benjamin Franklin? And how Deshaun Jackson, which happened in this season in Philadelphia and is legendary in Philadelphia. Everywhere you go, people talk about it. Deshaun Jackson spiked the ball at the 1-yard line before he got in the end zone. So he's almost in the end zone, and he spikes the ball, meaning you didn't make the touchdown. You celebrated before you got in there. And that becomes a great metaphor for Pat that I grabbed onto. And his father's always saying to him, don't spike the ball at the 1-yard line. Don't fuck it up. Don't blow it. And Randy says that's your whole town. That's your team. They get close and they blow it. And you feel like, is Pat going to be that? Is he going to get close and blow it? He comes in. His father didn't even know he was coming out. You see, the mother was advocating for him. He didn't even know. And now he's like, what, you didn't know I'm in the middle of a fight here? And the father says, what are you doing? Your wife left. She sold the house. And he instead confronts his father about the bookmaking. The father wants it to be a secret. There's collusion. His mother lied to him and said, don't tell him. And then said I never told him, about the bookmaking. So already the alliances of the family, which is everything to me, the alliances,
Yes.
He's with his mother, and now his father has just been told that, he knows about the bookmaking, and he has an endeavor he's trying to do, and now he's going to go upstairs and read these books, and he has a philosophy called Excelsior. And his father's like, what the hell this is a terrible mistake. This is going to be terrible. And Robert De Niro's face just says, this is a terrible, and you're like sitting on a ticking time bomb. And I love watching audiences who go into this movie in different parts of the country, and they're like, Bradley Cooper, The Hangover. And within 10 minutes, they're like, not what I said, very uncomfortable, not what I had in mind. And so you have to win them back, earn them back honestly, emotionally back into the picture with a different version of Bradley Cooper. Then he's reading Ernest Hemingway, which was another wonderful element in the book, all right, that I made my own way. But he's reading A Farewell to Arms, and it pisses him off that movie. All great literature, for some reason, has a very dark ending, and that would be a beef I have with all. Why is it? I go, George Lucas said this. This is BC. I can relate to all this personally. George Lucas said, a film tortured me and made me feel tortured and suffering. So what? That's what George Lucas said. That's not hard. I can do that. What's hard? I'll wring a kitten's neck. I'll fuck you up. All right? That is not hard to do. All right? So when I see films and all the tortured films, I'm like, okay, all right, I could do that. I could torture you all day long. This horrible person did this thing to this horrible person, then this happened, then they got cancer, then they got in a car crash, and then they killed a dog, and then this one stuck a pen in his eye, and then it's like, okay, wow, you made me feel sick, But so what's hard is to tell a story that I think is enchanting and is emotional and is real, and can also find some magic in it. To me, that's much harder to do. So, he reads that book and he's so pissed at Ernest Hemingway for the ending of that book, and he throws it out the window. And then, he's arguing. I love that monologue. He's arguing about how could Ernest Hemingway write this? How could my wife teach this book? They're teaching children to be suicidal. They're teaching them negative things, which then ties later to the letter,
right?
Where she says, I'm sorry, thank you for reading my syllabus. I'm moved that you did that. I'm sorry you think the books I taught are so negative. I think they're great works of art that can show kids how hard life can be and help them prepare for hard life. So those are 2 points of view on that. And then he has to go to therapy the next day, and you're like, and then you meet the therapist. And, well, the song, that's another thing we had to establish. So he goes in and the song's playing, and, he says, is that song really playing?
Yeah,
and,
that's
it's an important moment.
It's an important moment, and it's also...
It's an episode in the shrink's office. So in terms of putting together how messed up
where
is this guy...
we realized that the shrink really did play the music.
Yes.
Yeah.
And in terms of putting together how messed up is this guy, the evidence you have is he grabbed the steering wheel, he told his father he has an Excelsior attitude, a positive attitude. His father's concerned. He threw a book out the window, and he had an episode in the waiting room of the psychiatrist's office where he was going to tear the office apart to find a speaker and stop the music. That song freaked him out. And then we start to hear about the episode. Once he goes in, you see a little bit, you get the first half of the episode. You don't know what he did. We don't show you what he did until later, until the attic, when he's reliving it.
Well, it seems very important that right from the get-go, right from the first moment, like when he's talking to answering, as I said, that drill sergeant in his head or his first wife, his positive attitude is very sympathetic right from the get-go, so that even, you don't fear him until he grabs the wheel, in other words, that you don't, I think audiences, correct me if I'm wrong, it seems that audiences come wanting to identify with the protagonist, so that when the protagonist starts to act out in a difficult way, it's like you got to choose your moment as a storyteller as to when to have them transgress, because you know what I mean, like with the steering wheel or blowing up at 3 a.m. over Ernest Hemingway, or because it struck me, you've spoken well about Raging Bull, but I think there's an element of King of Comedy here. King of Comedy is one of the great movies, but you suffer, when he's bringing himself to Jerry Lewis's house, and you're a fish on you're a worm on a hook watching it, and you get to those sort of worm on a hook moments here, but it seems like you brought them out after you had sort of gotten us inside this guy's, upbeat, I'm going to make it kind of attitude. And it seems very important that way. And I wondered, you talk about working it out with your editor and getting it compressed, but it seems that you really do sketch all this out on paper and figure out what your beats are going to be.
No, you have to.
Yeah.
No, I wrote it over 20 times. You have to know exactly how you think it's going to go and where the money is, the emotional money.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you may not get it.
Well, I'm going to start opening it up to questions from the floor. I'm going to have more questions for you myself, but your question, sir, and then yours.
This man just arrived from a Wes Anderson film.
Oh, okay.
It seemed like an intervention when he did that.
So hang on, we got a mic coming to you.
Like the FBI just arrived.
That's right. Yeah. Oh, that's the gray outfit. Yeah.
This guy, no, you should have seen him the other night, though. He's like directly from a Wes Anderson film, and I love him. I love that he's become a recurring character in my life. But the other night he had like a double-breasted like navy, but like with gold trim. It was like a military jacket of some kind. He wore it beautifully with a tie. A little more conservative tonight.
Well, throughout the film, the character of Nikki is constantly talked about, yet she doesn't have that many lines. And it sort of reminds me a little bit of Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot, where Godot is constantly talked about, but yet Godot never appears. So I am assuming that it's more so of a metaphor of an idea of happiness than necessarily a character for the character of Nikki. So I'm wondering, was that in the book as well, or were there more scenes with Nikki, or did Nikki talk more in the book?
I think that she was always a bit of a phantom.
Yeah.
And that's a conceit, that's a dramatic device of the book that the film had to pull off. And I think your observation is to the point, and I think it functions as both things, as a person that he thinks he's going to get back to, and be a better person by the time he gets there. The relationship he blew, he's going to get back and say, look, I'm ready, I get it. I'm going to appreciate you, I'm going to compliment you, I'm going to be positive, I'm going to love our life, I'm not going to be negative I'm not going to be thoughtlessly negative and moody. I get it. But on the other hand, she's a phantom of an idea of what life can be, you know. And then as John Lennon said, you know, life is what happens while you're making other plans, you know. So, you know, so this is that it's that as well. So thanks for the Beckett.
Yeah, it's a very interesting analogy, because it's also an interesting choice you make. You do. Godot, of course, is kept off stage the entire time. You know, Harry Lime in The Third Man is not introduced until way in, until he's already
powerful thing.
Yeah.
That's a powerful thing.
It's a very powerful thing.
Like the Great and Powerful Oz, also.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you actually do a very effective job of diluting it in just the right way, because you do introduce her in the sort of the shower with the history teacher. So we get a sense of her a little bit. She's not a complete phantom. We get a sense of her reality, so that when she shows up for the
I
dance
wanted
contest,
people to know that she was real.
Yeah.
You know, because it was a danger that people would think, is this a complete hallucination? That was a danger.
Oh, yeah.
You know, we didn't want people to worry about that. You know, so it was the flashbacks and deciding exactly how much to show and when was important.
Yeah. Your question, sir, in the yellow shirt there.
In the USC hat.
Yes.
Bradley Cooper talked about that your way of shooting a movie and doing is unlike any way he's ever experienced before. He calls it 360. You use the camera, the 360 shooter from all different angles. Can you explain what that is?
Well, part of it is a function of the way I like a dialogue to flow. You know, I like it to flow and just keep flowing until they get into a rhythm and to not stop shooting. And so part of that is, you know, how Woody Allen did. You would light for 360 degrees, meaning we could turn any which way. You think you're off camera right now. I'm going to pan to you right now, you know, in the middle of the scene this time, you know. So the actors, it became like a stage play to the actors because they were on all the time. So it was very invigorating to them, and Robert De Niro really embraced it and liked it. Said it gave an immediacy to everything where they were just in it, you know. And it creates this thing that they're in, and you're almost watching a family have a moment, and sometimes you're chiming in from the sidelines, you know, like when Paulie Herman was fighting with De Niro about the parlay, you know, it felt like I was throwing lines in saying, yeah, tell him this, say this, you know, like almost like you were watching a family fight, you know, tell her that's bullshit. You would never twist the knife like that. And Paulie Herman goes, that's bullshit. So, you know, I don't know. It's just that's the reason. Part of it's also practical. You know, you could have shot The Fighter or this movie in twice the amount of time. They were both shot in 33 days. This film was 152 pages, and it was shot in 33 days. So that means you're doing 8 pages a day at least. You know, it's like you're moving, and you got to keep moving. You know, so I mean, and I accept that. I like a lean, mean. I think it makes everybody step up, including myself. It makes everybody pay attention and be grateful that we're there and make it count. You know, that was, I would say, the biggest thing for me.
It was something, you know, Josh Logan, when he was working with Marilyn Monroe in Bus Stop, discovered, and other directors who remarked on it, sometimes they deliberately don't say cut because they say, you know, the energy drops, people start making phone calls, you know, they just go right back to the original positions with the film still rolling and just keep energy up inside the scene. Is that a thing that you do too, just to keep everybody performing and go straight into the next take without cutting, just to keep that energy high? Is that
absolutely?
Yeah.
No, I want it to be immersive. I want people to get going. I don't want to hear the words cut, and I don't want to hear the words last looks. You know, there will be no last looks. You know, we're not going to have people coming on, unless there's a real problem. We're not going to have people coming on people come in, they're chewing gum, they're fixing the hair. You know, we're not doing that. You know, and people have to get to this place and then stay there as much as possible. And these actors wanted it. You can't do it unless everybody's in it together. And we had a super attitude. I'm very grateful to the whole cast and crew. They were amazingly dedicated. They would have walked through fire for the movie, you know, and they did whatever it took every day. And we had such a gifted ensemble.
I want to ask you, I want to draw out a little bit about going into the earlier parts of your career. For instance, I mean, I'm a great admirer of Three Kings, for example, and I also a great admirer of I Heart Huckabees, you know, and it seemed that to juxtapose those two movies, I mean, one could not predict Huckabees from Three Kings, just in terms of what would get your interest, except that they both have that kind of spontaneous fieriness about them, you know. And what I liked about I Heart Huckabees, and I think it was a kind of a critic's darling when it came out, is that there was no known formula to which it adhered. It was just something, you see a lot of movies in a year, and this one was extremely original. Now, it strikes me that by doing The Fighter, you know, the Fighter becomes the next film after Huckabees, and it's a much earthier, more character-driven film, strikes me as a kind of healthy pushing off from Huckabees. You're going in a very different direction, almost reacting to yourself, reacting to your own picture. But I don't think that, it's not a condemnation of the earlier film. It's just a movement in a different direction.
Oh, no. There was a big shift in my life and everything. My attitude as a writer and as a filmmaker, everything changed very much. I would say, as much as I like the earlier films, and I think I do feel that there's a lot of good things in Huckabees. There's also a lot of lost opportunities. And I wasn't able to be present the way I would have liked to have been. And I would say, thereafter, I was like Homer Simpson falling down a cliff for several years. If you've never seen that, it goes something like this. They do it for that long when he falls down a cliff. That's how long it felt to me. So I felt like I went through a divorce. I think I call that sort of my head up my ass phase. And so I feel like I learned a lot of things. I learned you're just always learning. And look, some people just jump right in and they're, I'm a late bloomer. What can I tell you? I'm proud of the early work, but I feel like now I'm finally hitting my stride. I did a roundtable with Quentin Tarantino who talks about not wanting to mess up his average, which is an extraordinary average, before he retires. It's like Michael Jordan wanting to retire before he gets really sloppy. But, I'm just getting started, and I look at, Hitchcock or Billy Wilder or John Huston, who did a lot of great work as they kept going, and that's what I'm aiming to do. I would say I just see this pattern in Hollywood. I could talk about it anywhere. Maybe the simplest way to talk about it is that I feel like I was overthinking things. I wasn't coming from an instinctive, emotional place, and that is the only place I come from right now. And after there was visceral things in Spanking the Monkey, Flirting with Disaster, and Three Kings. Huckabees had the opportunity to be more visceral, and I felt I blew it in some respects. As much as I love so much of the film, I feel it's painful for me to watch it because I feel it was a lost opportunity. But you learn from these things, So fortunately, I learned, and I just said, how about this? How about we just keep it real, and we keep it raw, and we really just bear down and make it count, and really, really drill down. And The Fighter was a film I probably wouldn't have looked at 10 years ago. I would have said, I don't get it. What is a boxer? I don't know. And people come to me and they say it's a fighter movie, it's a boxing movie. It was never a boxing movie to me, just like this was never a mental illness movie to me. To me, it's just about these characters. So to me, boxing was the medium and the MacGuffin and the engine of the world. It made it a very specific world, and it was like a blowtorch you can use on the story whenever you need to. You get this incredible pressure and tension and motivation as you need it. But in between is all this intense interaction and behavior and emotion, and that's the stuff I love, and specificity. And that's what I love, rendering those people and then trying to craft a narrative. Because you could just render them. That would just be like doing a painting. But I think the double hard craftsman task is to then make it a propulsive narrative experience that also has thematic resonance and sort of gets you somewhere. That's hard, so I said, just try to relate to these people, make it real. And then The Fighter was very rewarding. And I sort of discovered, I think I can at least have a shot at doing some good work at, and I just did it again in this picture, which I had in my back pocket, and that's how it was meant to happen. I thought it would happen first, but then I got to make it better after The Fighter and rewrite it better,
Could you talk a little bit about standing your ground, because you must fly in the face of all kinds of interference? I mean, it's very provocative material. So even actors, I know, for example, Melissa Leo had talked openly about resisting what you said until she saw the movie. You're right, In other words, there are people that you have to overcome resistance to get to the point that you need to get to. Not to home in on Melissa Leo, but just any kinds of notes that you get from studios. You're having to fight for a point of view on things. At the same time, you don't want to cancel out what might be a good idea coming your way.
But this is the nice thing about getting older and being a veteran and having taken your lumps and having some scars and and feeling battle tested, is I can say that I can confidently engage. I will get in a cage fight over any notes. It doesn't have to be a cage fight. Meaning no, I'll have the conversation, because let's see what happens. Maybe you're right. I'm not precious. I'm not like I'm an artist. I think that is the death. That's death. You have to have some degree of that. You have to know who you are and what you're doing, and you have to protect it like a mother hen. There's plenty of that. But you also have to be willing to say, well, this person seems to have a strong feeling about something. What is it? And you listen to it and you go, And sometimes you think about it and you discuss it and you debate it. I'm not afraid of any note, any executive. I'll go toe-to-toe with anybody. And sometimes the film will get better because of that. I mean, Harvey Weinstein had some very interesting ideas that I thought helped the film quite a bit. So did Robert De Niro. Bradley Cooper was a true collaborator, as was Mark Wahlberg and Christian Bale and Amy Adams and Melissa. I mean, you want to hear what people have to say. And sometimes you need to have the authority and the confidence to let them know when, no, it's going to go like this, but it's going to be okay. Or how about this? We'll do it both ways and I'll meet you in the editing room. I'm always happy to do that. And sometimes I'm glad we did it their way because I say, oh, they were right. I was wrong.
That's great. Your question. And we'll get you a microphone. And then yours. No.
Hi, thanks for the conversation. It's wonderful. Sure. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about contrasting those very private, lonely moments that we were talking about earlier with very explosive moments that these characters undergo. And I'm thinking of I Heart Huckabees in particular, Jason Schwartzman's character's opening scene where he's cursing, and then when Dustin Hoffman is going through his dream in the box, that sort of explosive moment contrasting with those private moments, and how you think that contributes to our relationship with the character.
If I could do Huckabees again, I would do it real emotional, and then I think it would be really, really good. I don't know how to answer your question except to say that if you pay attention to people or characters or yourself, you have, I don't know, I have those things in me. I mean, you may not, you seem like a nice, quiet person. I mean, maybe you don't, but surely you think those things. Maybe you don't even think those things. Maybe, I don't know. No, I mean the unpleasant things is what I meant. The things that he was talking about, the more unsavory things he was talking about.
But
I don't know what to say.
Well, to take it from Huckabees to Silver Lining Playbook. I mean, you have also there you have scenes of intimacy and then explosion, and it's unexpected where they come. Like take the climax when Tiffany sees that the wife has actually shown up, right? And she goes off and she's starting having a drink, and she drinks and she's flirting with this other guy, and it's quite a wonderful set of fuses that you get lit. I mean, we think we know where it's going, and then all of a sudden the characters reality is misbehaving, and so they're
sort of what you're saying, or not really.
It's a contrast of tones, so that she becomes explosive.
I think the other good thing is you get a little, get practice, writing and making movies. Is you begin to recognize when you have something really good in your sights. You're like, oh, that's good. Let's get that. We're gonna get that. It's like two guys. She should go to the bar and she should have a drink with some strange guy. That's good. I just have like this instinct of like this, just like for how fucked up things go, how they go. This is how that goes. This is how that goes. She feels insecure. She feels fucked up. This is where she ends up. And you're just like, where is this going? I mean, is she gonna even? We even wrote drafts where she left. She didn't even stay to do the dance thing. You know what I'm saying? So you explore those ways, and that you end up keeping some of it, even if you don't keep all of it. Just having an instinct for like what's messed up. When I teach, I've been involved with this high school in the Bronx. That's the first public high school for cinema, and it's become a jewel of the New York City public schools. And I've been very proud to help them for 10 years. And I always get more than I give. I know that's a cliche, but it's true. And I mean, when you go up there and you teach, but I mostly help them raise money by bothering celebrities. So, and getting studios, guilt trip studios. Look at these poor kids in the Bronx. But you go up there, and mostly what I say to them is, I go, just come on, just tell me. What is it? What are you thinking? Tell me the story. I love to get kids to pitch me stories. Let's get it out. If it's just a few fragments of a few things, let's get those fragments out, and let's find out what turns you on about the why. Why do you like these fragments? Is it based on an idea of what you think should be cool? Of a movie that you liked? Or is it based on something, is it based on an intention that you can really dig into yourself? that we have to unpack a little bit, but let's really just tell the story. Let's get to it. Because that's where I start to, and as people tell me, I don't know, you just have to go by your instinct, like, that's good. Oh, that should happen. What if this happened? Wouldn't that be? As soon as you feel something that's really charged, to me, it feels like a good thing. That something's going to happen. Something that's emotional, something that's surprising. And then if you can start to craft those as characters and arcs, that's the most satisfying work that we all do. I just want to say to those of you writing torturous movies that I so decried earlier, I go right ahead. I would write different things at different times in my life. Everybody writes different things in their life. And when I was first starting out, I had to write torturous stuff. I wanted to vomit on the world, and so that's a valid artistic intention, and or stab the world or do whatever it is, but I think and go for it. And they're all necessary. And sometime I may be stuck awake at 2 a.m. and I may be glad I see that picture because I needed to feel that emotion.
But under this gentleman's question and under your answer is a key aspect of writing that is very easy to lose sight of when you get sort of out there on the blank page, which is the need to confront.
Here, let me tell you my biggest secret. Wait for 1 second. You see the blank page. I avoid the blank page as much as possible, and I'll tell you why. If I opened up Final Draft right now, I get the heebies. I just like Final Draft. I haven't even written any draft. Final draft. Elements, characters, So I mean, for me, you kind of have to. It's like it's not helpful, For me, what's helpful was tricking myself, and I learned this I wrote my first real movie that I got made on jury duty, and that's where I learned the trick yourself school of writing. You wrote when you tricked yourself into it. You didn't know you were writing, but you wrote, and that's what made it happen. From a better place. That's what I try to do with actors too. Let's make you forget that you're acting. Oh, something happened that you didn't expect. And that's why that 9th take, after I often say, okay, that's it. Yeah. Wait a minute, let's do it one more time. And something magical always happens when everybody thinks they're done and they're like, they're walking off the set. And I go, let's do it again. And that's when Robert De Niro cries. I did not ask him to cry. It was not scripted to cry. I never directed him to cry. He cried, and me and Bradley freaked out. We were like, holy shit, I can't believe this is happening. So then it was, and then we said, would you mind doing it a couple more times with it? And he loves his craft. He's such a good guy. He stands on the set. He had to watch those dancers. I'm going to come back to the question. He watches these dancers for 2 days. I couldn't bear to look at that part of the dancing floor because it means Robert De Niro standing as an extra over here for 2 days. Now his close-ups and his emotion were everything in that scene. And when we got them, the mother, Jackie Weaver, his emotion, everybody's emotion is imperative to be woven to make that dance what it is, which is emotional. The movie's about emotion, that everything's about emotion. So it was very important, but he had to stand there for 2 days, and I couldn't even bear to look at him. I was like, how do I have him standing there, Robert De Niro in a green blazer for 2 days? And he's not saying anything. And I went over to him when Jennifer Lawrence was dipping the prop marshmallows in the prop chocolate fountain and eating them. And I asked, is this okay, to the set people? And they said yes, and she ate all the props. And I encouraged her too, because I told her she was a girl next door, she was a real woman, and I wanted her. She came to us a little starved from Hunger Games and from X-Men. She was a little. I was like eat, and she ate, and she was very happy. So, but she said she almost cried because it was the first time any director ever encouraged her to eat. So, but anyway, I said, Robert, how do you do this? You stand here every day. And he, who loves his work, especially when he was so emotionally committed as he was here, which is why I think we got him doing stuff we haven't seen him do in a long time. He said, look at all these other people. There's 200 people here. They're not getting paid like I'm getting paid. They're not getting the recognition that I get. They can do it. Why can't I do it? And I thought that was a beautiful thing that he said. He was our teacher the whole way through. And what was the question we were answering?
It was very simple. It had to do with confronting, in other words, because it seemed like one of the things...
the page, and I jumped in about the page.
Yeah.
They'll get to the question eventually. So the Tricking Yourself School of Writing, I had an official thing I was writing for 2 years. I had a day job. I was a bartender. I'd go to family weddings, and I'd be like, how's that writing thing going? How's that going? It's such a relished moment for an aspiring writer, right? My mother tells me you're a bartender at Jacqueline Onassis' house. Yes, that's true. What do you see famous people there? Yes, I do. And you serve them drinks? Yes, I do. You're becoming the waiter guy. That's what I was becoming at my family events. I was like, so it's getting scary. So I had a short film. I was given money to turn in, and I said I have to turn it into a feature by the state of New York. I can't do another short film. I took 2 years of rewriting it, killing myself. 5 a.m. every day, wake up and keep rewriting. I wrote that movie 15 different ways. I probably learned a lot about writing, but it never became a good feature. And then finally, when I was on jury duty, I had a filthy little rotten, gnarly fantasy about a horrible summer where my mom was drunk and crashed a car. And I said, that is just filthy. You can't write that. And I said, well, I'm just going to write that for me. It's just filthy. It is obscene and disgusting, and you should never tell anyone that you wrote this. And then that became, Spanking the Monkey, and then it just took off like a rocket ship. I wrote it in 3 weeks. It was like blip, because I tricked myself into doing it. So I like to do it. I'm a big believer in telling the story to people, and writing emails. And I go, look at that. I wrote an email to a friend, and I have an outline for like 4 scenes. An outline for a friend. So just emails and conversations, and if you tell it enough times, then the act of putting it on paper is almost just like a clerical act, because it's like, well, I already told it a lot of times, so I can't get all fussy about when I'm putting it on the page. I'll do that later in the 10th or the 12th or the 15th draft. And the question about confronting, was that what the question was about?
Yeah.
Was about going from quiet to explosive? Was that?
Well, it was coming off of that, and it had to do with. I think if there's a pulse that really works under your films is that you never shy from a confrontation of any kind, whether it be a quiet confrontation or a loud one. And I just, in terms of giving advice to the folks here, it seems that you were onto something. You were getting to my question when you were talking about doing 20 drafts of something, because you can't be afraid to do 20 drafts or do 9 takes and then say to Robert De Niro, "Would you mind doing it one more time?" That's a kind of confrontation that people get shy of in storytelling, and it seems really important that you just keep butting your head against it, because something is going to yield. It seems that's a key part of the craft of getting it onto the page, is to but you trick it out of yourself too. It sounds like. Yeah. Well,
it's your instinct. It's your inner, the homing device that women have in their uterus, or that men have wherever they have it. I mean, it's like there's an instinct that has to go to what it's from, who you are. I got so much of what I have from the music of my family and their who they are and what their voices are and their energy. So I ended up, I don't know. And then you pay attention to her. That's what you have in you.
Yeah.
But I don't know. What do I know? I don't know. Maybe it's just whatever turns you on. Also, I don't know.
Your question a moment. First, Noah in the plaid shirt there, and then you. Oh.
I have a homing device in my uterus too. There's a great scene in Three Kings with Saeed I'm going to slaughter this name. Tagmaoui, where he's interrogating Mark Wahlberg. And these guys are essentially the same guy. They both have, daughters. They're both fathers. And it's a brilliant scene, and, where he pours the oil into Mark Wahlberg's mouth. And like you guys were talking about before, what I like about you as a filmmaker is you don't demonize people. I think in traditional movies it tends to be like, if they go with a traditional hero and an enemy, it means great box office. But if you take the risk of showing your enemy as a human being, like what Syriana did, another brilliant movie that tackled the Middle East, you run the risk of not doing as well. But I just wanted to ask you, in today's movie climate in 2012, after we've had sort of the innocence of Muslims causes these crazy riots, how do you feel about tackling a movie about the Middle East in this day and age? And can it be done in today's climate with such intelligence in the way that you did it, I think?
I know that we were made by Warner Brothers in what kills me about that film is that film, it was so radical for what it was at the time. Mm-hmm. Because for me, people were like, "You're making a movie about what?" And I was like, the first Gulf War, and I was like, but I want to do it in sort of this really surreal way, and I was turned on by all this weird stuff that I didn't think had been shown, but Warner Brothers made this because they had been threatened by Hezbollah or somebody on another film first, so they made us have like a mullah a priest to be our consultant, and I had to drive out to Claremont and meet with him and sit with him and and go, and they were like, we were offended by them saying sand niggers and camel jockeys, and I said, yeah, but that's the story, is the guys start out, that's what they start out saying, and then they get to know the guys, and then they wouldn't say that. You know what I'm saying? Once they got to know the guys. So that's what the story was. And then this whole other Gulf War happened. Yeah. And so now I think when people see it, they must be like, I don't understand. What is this? Oh, there was another Gulf War earlier? It's history has superseded the cinema over there. But I don't know. It would be pretty charged, I'll tell you that. I was afraid to shoot in the Middle East at that time. It was right after the thing happened in 98.
With
Somalia,
Somalia,
and then the ship got blown up.
Yeah.
And I just, and so we shot, mostly in the
Arizona?
deserts in the South, and I just, I'm always impressed when somebody goes and does that. I mean, Catherine Bigelow just did it, didn't she?
Yes.
Yeah. So
I mean, one thing that's striking about Three Kings, I remember at the time, because when it was still just the only Gulf War that had happened, it was about 8 years after the war, and you were telling a story very akin in some ways to, Richard Brooks's The Professionals. It's like the buried treasure that's over the Mexican border, so to speak. It was a kind of a Western that allowed you to, because it had a Western structure, to allow you to sneak in all that great detail about the war itself, so that it was on that kind of familiar ground. And it seemed, I mean, under this question is a little bit of, do you foresee maybe that we get enough distance on today that you might be able to walk that sort of tightrope between a realistic picture and a kind of a legend that you're also creating, that, because it seemed to work on that level as both, documentary and a legend. One supported the other.
I don't know what to say. I know that probably the picture, The Silver Linings, probably has that as well, because it has a romance that's certainly mushrooms in the middle of it, or flowers in the middle of it, but was never approached that way.
Well, yeah, I guess and sorry it's taking me so long to unearth the actual question I'm trying to ask. I think it has to do with the importance of finding the right structure, because you can have a subject. I mean, the Middle East and all these, or people having afflictions or being unfiltered. These are great topics.
Well, it's
for
like
movie,
the fighter. The fighter had the basic chassis of a fight film, which is part of which I hated. I was like, we have to have the Rocky ending now. Do we have to do that? And the movie really ends emotionally on the porch between Christian Bale and Amy Adams, and then Mark Wahlberg pulls up, and the rest of it is gravy. But you can feel like, well, they've sort of earned it, so let's see them have a nice experience together, for sort of the end of the picture. But you can have a chassis that is a useful chassis, and that allows you the freedom to run with things that we maybe haven't seen so much before, like the sisters fighting on the porch, or all that stuff, or the guy jumping out the window, which he really did, so that his mother wouldn't know he was in a crack house, even though everybody knew he was in a crack house.
The question here, gentleman in the second row.
Hi. I just wanted to know if you had any mentors early on in your career that really sort of went to bat for you and helped you out, and what those experiences may have been like. And then also, from inception to a finished film, what is the most personally gratifying part of the process for you?
I don't know. I mean, I had a couple of teachers in college, that were helpful to me, but I don't think I ever had a filmmaking mentor. I wanted one, and when Phil Joannou was handpicked by Steven Spielberg to direct his first feature called 3 O'Clock High, I was like, Phil Joannou. But God had another plan for me. You know what I'm saying? I'm not happy with how it turned out. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't know.
I think you've done okay so far.
I never had a mentor like that. Somebody to help. I served drinks to Martin Scorsese and Mike Nichols. I served drinks to Mike Nichols at Jacqueline Onassis' house when he was like dating her or something, and he said, I used to do what you're doing. I said, well, I want to do what you're doing. That's your entree to be my mentor. And he said, well, good luck. And the other one, and Scorsese at the premiere of Goodfellas at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, I was serving him his drink, and he was very nervous and concerned with many things other than the bartender. And And I said, I tried to chat him up about cinema, and he was like, could you just make the drink, please? And, so no, not so much with the mentors, but they both were my mentors by their work. I just, by studying their films, I just tell you, I've gotten more gifts than I ever could have gotten perhaps from hanging out with them. I think that's probably a dangerous thing, actually. And whenever somebody would get kissed into the Spielberg camp, I'd be like, be careful, just be careful. You're under somebody else's umbrella, somebody else's creative umbrella. Like, I don't know, man. I just think it's good to do your own thing. And I don't know, having a mentor might not be the best thing in the world. The most satisfying part of the process? That's impossible for me to say. I would probably say the editing part is pretty satisfying if you haven't fucked yourself. If you're not like, oh, why didn't we? If there's that, but since if you make sure, I pinch myself every day and I go, no, you don't want to have that. So, is there anything today that you think you should be getting that you're not getting? And we filmed things 3 ways sometimes. Let's Bradley do it much more bipolar, much more Asperger's-y. And sometimes you use that and sometimes you don't, and then much less. Jennifer Lawrence, much more fiery. And then in the editing room you discover, well, a little bit goes a long way. So maybe we didn't need it. So, but it was, thank God you did it both ways.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Your question here. Get to that microphone. There we go. Yes.
Hi, what did Bradley Cooper's character say to his wife after the dance competition? What did he whisper?
Whispers
in
into her ear, and we don't get to know.
Well, he told her what the over/under was on the first playoff game, and she was like, "You think I should put money down like that?" And he was like, "Yes, I think you should." Are you going to bet that way? Yes, I'm going to bet that way. Angela's here. What a gift. Angela Grillo, ladies and gentlemen, her wife, her daughter, my ex-wife, helped me start my wonderful career as a genius producer and a teacher at NYU, and a wonderful person. And Angela acted as a nurse in Spanky the Monkey, and she was in Huckabee's too. She was a bossy local lady, and which she came by honestly, because she was a local town manager back east, yeah, and a very formidable woman. How nice to see you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for coming. And thanks to Angela, and thanks to Janet, I have the son that made me make the movie. Otherwise, I never would have made the movie. So I can thank you guys for that. Because without Matthew, I wouldn't have paid attention to the book. I wouldn't have.
Now, this question comes down to the issue of a character's privacy and what you can afford to leave out, or
What's
maybe
the question?
It had to do with what he's saying into her ear.
That question.
Yeah.
No, I thought he was saying the things to her that you would say when you're telling someone you had loved. And again, it's how fitting. I could do this to Janet. It's so fitting. To say the things that you loved and the things you were sorry for and the things that you were grateful for and the things you regretted, and to just say goodbye that way. You know what I'm saying? So, that's what he did. That's what I imagined he did. And then he gave her the over-under for the playoff game.
Question there. Yeah. You keep your hand up so the microphone can come to you. Yeah, there you go.
By the way, I still don't understand the over/under. And when I was asking bookmakers about bookmaking, because I love worlds, right? Like that's my uterus homing device. I'm like, that's good. That's a specific weird thing, the bookmaking thing in Robert De Niro's hands. That's like the basic caveman in you writers like, that's good. Do that. Something good will happen. You just keep it basic, go towards that. So I heard the language parlay, which I'd never heard. And I had, relatives explain it to me, and I just thought, wow, what great language, the parlay. And how wonderful to have characters in a movie at the beginning of the scene going, no, don't make it part of the parlay. Don't make it. And everybody's like, what's a parlay? Everybody in the audience. I love that most of the audience would be saying, we don't know what a parlay is. That's cool. Suspense, in a scene. It's for people to be like, they're talking about something that's very important. I don't know what it is. And then to have the psychiatrist ask, what is a parlay? So, right. And same thing with the over-under. I don't know what that is. So it's been explained to me. I'm not very good with math, though, so I don't. Maybe someone can explain it to me.
When you're working with your DP on set, is a lot of the scenes, like how you shoot a scene, is it already pre-visualized in your head, or are you in the moment with the actors and sort of letting them dictate camera angles and I guess like what's your process on set, like trying to get a shot or shots?
Sometimes you have some very specific shots that you know you want to do, okay, or ideas come to you. You know, the muses visit you and they say, look at this narrow Lowell street with identical houses. Why don't you put the camera on a golf cart and shoot down this street really fast? It will have a telescoping effect. I don't know where you'll use it, but you know, maybe you can use it here. So sometimes you have something like that come to you. I start the day by getting everybody together in the van. It's a scout. I don't have a trailer. I don't take a trailer on the set because I want to show the spirit of the low budget production, you know, and that you know, I'll eat lunch on the set or, you know, in one of the actors' trailer. But if they're kind enough to invite me. So go to Robert De Niro's trailer where he always has the best mozzarella and the best bread. Me and Bradley Cooper sat there during a script meeting at lunch in this trailer, and I was like, it's this mozzarella sitting in this bowl of water, and I was like, that looks very good. Can I have some of that? Yes, sure, go ahead. And it was on a counter. It was so good. It was the best. I had so much of it, and he didn't have any of it. And I had so much, and then when we left the trailer, Bradley and I were like dead. It was like it had a ball of concrete. And I went into the afternoon, I was like, why did I eat that mozzarella and bread? I'm like, I want to just go to sleep. I have no energy. De Niro was just laughing. So I like to gather everybody in the van. Everybody, the AD, the actors, everybody, and talk about what we're going to do. Because when you go on a set, the energy is so scattered. And it's very serious what we're doing. It's very important. And it really lives in that van. It's like right now, this is the movie. The movie's not out there with the grips walking around and like, I'm going to get a cookie at the craft services table. The movie's here right now. This is the movie. And I have to impart that feeling to everybody in the van. This is what I want this scene to be today. And this is what and then everybody tells me what they think. And, you know, and I make a list of shots. You know, sometimes I do it the night before, usually. I do not watch dailies. I'll make a shot list. You know, I just have faith that it came out okay in the camera, and I make a list of shots and I say this is what I want to do, and let's see how realistic it is or not realistic, and then the shot list is designed in a way. I think about what it's cutting from the scene that we came out of. So if we came out of a wide scene, is it cool? You don't want to go to another wide shot. You want to go to a really, really interesting closer shot. And I do like to move the camera, and I'm getting, you know, so you, and then you want, and sometimes, and then as you go through the day and you know you're getting what you must have in the best way you can, then I get to like, okay, if we could do anything we wanted, like I say to the actors, I say 1 or 2 takes for that. And that sometimes you get some really cool stuff when that's where you take a lot of risks, you know, at that point. Sometimes you don't have time to do that.
How much of that do you write into the script, those kinds of opportunities?
If you read the script, which I think you will be able to do if you can, I mean, you'll see there are specific, sometimes it's very visually specific, you know, but, and sometimes it's not. So sometimes it's very specific. Again, the emotion is that's the bouncing ball. So the image has to reflect the emotion that's going to carry you to the next thing.
Okay, Pamela, we have a question from you back here.
Thank you. Hi, David. So your films are so wonderful, and, you know, I told you I love them. And obviously the public does too. You get a lot of nominations, multiple wins. So I've always wanted to ask a director, I'm not so much during filming because you're, you know, so focused on everything. But when you're in the editing room, do you ever look and say, woo, we've got some winners here? Because I know as an audience, when we're watching films, we're like, oh, my goodness, you know, definitely nominations, blah, blah, blah. Do you, as a director, writer, director, et cetera, do you feel that ever? Because I know you were so surprised during The Fighter and all the hype. I'm just curious. Do you feel it?
Well, I think I'm a superstitious person, so I think I would like to ignore your whole question because I think it's a bad luck question.
A grain of salt over each shoulder.
Even to bring up the N word, the nomination word, is a bad luck. You really can't think about it, and you just have to really just, that's the best thing. See, when you get your head out of your ass, you have the procedure at Cedars-Sinai, and you go. I had the procedure, and once that happens, you see everything a little more clearly. It's like LASIK eye surgery. So, you don't focus on that. You just make sure you're getting something that, as a craftsman, a writer, and a director, you're getting the emotional content, the best of your ability, and you don't sit around patting yourself on the back, at all. That's bad. That's straight up bad. No. No, you have to be excited. You have to be excited. And sometimes it doesn't. I don't mean in any way to disrespect you or your question or anything. You were a great foil for my bit. But you just have to feel. You have to feel psyched about it. And you do. It is like it's epic cutting a movie. You know what I mean? It's like a marriage. You know what I mean? It's like sometimes you're like, fuck this movie. Because you're going in every day. It's like the fucking movie. You know what I mean? How can I look at it one more fucking time? You know what I'm saying? Because it's like, it's all you do. The movie. I remember Alexander Payne telling me that when he was on the campaign for him. For Sideways. I said, how's it going? He goes, oh, the fucking movie. I go, what do you mean? He goes, I don't know. It's just everything's about the movie. I go, what else do you want to do? He goes, how about like life? I just want to go live my life. I want to go eat a meal or go somewhere. And so, but that's a luxury problem, and we should be so lucky to have the privilege to make the movies. And you want to know that you're in the hunt for excellence, and you never stop. And even now, there are things that I would do to make the picture better. Both pictures, I'll never tell you, but even all the way up through all the previews. I unlocked the picture a couple times. I realized, it was previewing very well. And you're always surprised when you show a movie. You always learn things that you never knew. Things that you thought were strong suck. Things that you, very often the thing that I'm the most certain is just gold is not. Very often. And very often there are things that surprise you, and there are things that are funny that you would never know were going to be treated as funny, and there are things that are upsetting that you would never know. But after those previews, we learned an enormous amount of things, and then we locked the picture, and I said, you know what? I still think we have to unlock the picture, which is expensive, because they start this whole post-production on a low-budget movie. This movie was 11 below the line. They're both very low budget. I said, I do feel we need to open up and have more sustained pauses on certain characters at certain moments. I said that is a critical thing. And you put yourself at the mercy of the court, the Harvey Weinstein court, and you ask, for him to spend a few more dollars to do that. And if you're lucky, he's happy about the film, and he'll let you do it.
Because it is, without leaving the awards and such things to one side, I mean, there's a great expression that the critic Kenneth Tynan came up with in the 1960s, long before there was HD TV, called HD High Definition Performance or High Definition Performer. It was like people who could communicate a maximum of talent with an economy of gesture. Like Robert De Niro would be like high definition, Jennifer Lawrence, Jackie Weaver. These are people that, I mean, you get with it just an eye blink, they project so much, and you attract these, I mean, they certainly they want to work with you. So in this movie in particular, you've got, as in The Fighter, you've got a tremendous sort of volatility there. I think the excitement that your fans feel when they're seeing the movie, it comes out of that because it is that kind of pause. In other words, that you can give them a sustainable pause because even when they're in the background.
Well, because something's happening. And that's a beautiful thing about Jackie Weaver, is she is such a wonderful stage actress. She's an amazing actress, from Animal Kingdom. And anytime the camera hit her, there was enormous power coming out of her eyes, and that's a gift. Robert De Niro, Bradley Cooper says, "What is that?" And Bob's supposed to tell him it's a handkerchief, but Bob instead chooses to say nothing, and does like this Marcel Marceau pantomime. That he goes like, "What is it?" He goes, "What is that?" And Bob goes, "It's a." Still going, and finally Bradley goes, "A handkerchief?" And Bob goes, "Yeah," and he folds it back up. And that's the whole thing.
We got time for one more question. Yours, sir. Just if you keep your hand up, and we'll get that mic to you. There you go.
In the dance final scene, I noticed that the colors were black and white for them when they're dancing. Did you picture that as a wedding, sort of fictional wedding between them?
black and white in the coda,
in their costumes,
in the coda
you mean?
in the house.
Right. In the actual
What they're wearing seems
yes,
to be black
she's
and
wearing white and he's wearing.
No, I was not conscious of that. I am drawn to classic palettes, though. I like to pick palettes with the designer that are very specific, and certain colors are not allowed, and certain colors are only allowed at certain times, and so it can give the movie a more classic. I feel, and when I look at some of the movies I love, they seem to be like that. So I just learn from the movies I love. And it was a big decision, her dancing costume. She was originally supposed to have some dress like those other dancers. It's so funny to me. Thank God for Mandy Moore, our choreographer. She got all these amazing dancers, and when we saw these thoroughbreds when we showed up on the location. We all had the same reaction Robert De Niro did when he says, "Holy shit," and because they're like thoroughbred racehorses, from the Churchill Downs or something. They're like just watching them walk with every ripple, and I'm like, is that painted on her, sewn on her? It's like the clothing is just fused with their body. And Jennifer had been rehearsing with Bradley. They had to get to know each other very quickly. They had 2 weeks to rehearse the dance stuff, and I think we're supposed to stop now. That's the timer on the microphone.
Here, you want to try that?
Thank you all for coming out. Thank you all for coming out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Sure.